If you were lying on an operating table and the surgical team suddenly ran out of bandages.
Oh, that is a terrifying thought.
Right. Or worse, they ran out of the specific heart stent you needed. I mean, you wouldn't blame the surgeon.
No, absolutely not. You'd blame the person whose job it was to make sure those items were actually on the shelf.
Exactly. So today we are taking a deep dive into your CPI materials. That stands for Certified in Planning and Inventory Management. And our mission today is to completely change how you look at inventory.
Yeah, because it's definitely a subject that suffers from a major branding problem. I mean, people tend to picture inventory as, this static, dimly lit warehouse full of dusty boxes.
Or just a holding pen for stuff waiting to be sold.
Exactly, just sitting there.
But the reality, which you quickly realize when studying inventory planning, is that it is intensely dynamic. Like, inventory is the actual lifeblood of a supply chain. Or I guess, depending on how a company manages it, it can act kind of like corporate cholesterol.
Oh, wow. That cholesterol analogy is incredibly accurate.
Right.
Yeah, because you need a certain baseline amount of it to survive, to keep the system functioning. But if you accumulate too much of the wrong kind or let it pool in the wrong places, it will absolutely cause a corporate heart attack.
So true. Okay, let's unpack the core of this. Before a planner can manage all those pallets and boxes, they have to answer the most fundamental question, which is, why do we even hold inventory in the first place?
Which seems like a simple question.
It does. But the crazy part is, if you walk into different departments within the exact same company, you will get fiercely competing answers to that question. It's just a constant tug of war.
It really is. Which brings us to the purposes and goals of inventory and how to negotiate those trade-offs. So picture a traditional balance scale.
Okay, got it.
On one side, you have the drive to minimize financial investment and maintain agility. Like, you want your business to be light on its feet.
Makes sense.
But on the other side of the scale, you want to maximize production efficiency and provide perfect customer service. And those two sides are fundamentally at war with each other.
And that scale, it basically maps directly onto the internal turf wars happening in conference rooms, like every single day.
Oh, yeah, every day.
So let's walk through these competing views. First up, you have marketing and sales. I mean, their entire goal is to increase revenue and keep the customer happy. They just want the ability to say a resounding yes to anyone who walks in the door.
Right. So from their perspective, customer service has to be pushed to the absolute maximum. And to achieve that, they demand higher inventory investment.
They want the warehouse packed.
Exactly. Packed with every possible variation, color, size of a product, just in case a buyer wants it. But they are completely indifferent to production efficiency.
Yeah.
Actually, they often hurt production efficiency because they constantly want the factory to, switch gears and run customized small batches to satisfy those niche market demands.
Which operations absolutely passionately hates.
Oh, they despise it.
Because the operations department is judged by a totally different metric, right? Reducing manufacturing costs. They want smooth, uninterrupted flow. Like, they want to turn the machines on and run the exact same product for 2 straight weeks without a single setup change.
Right, because for operations, that makes production efficiency go through the roof. But to pull off those long runs, well, inventory investment also balloons.
Because they're just churning out massive stockpiles of a single item.
Exactly. And the irony here is that customer service might still tank. I mean, you could have a warehouse bursting at the seams, but because operations only ran like one type of product all month, you lack the specific mix of goods the customer actually wants to buy today.
Wow. So marketing and operations are both driving your inventory investment sky high, but for completely opposite reasons.
Yep. And then finance walks into the room.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Finance looks at inventory and just sees dollar bills trapped in cardboard boxes. They want to increase profit and free up cash flow.
So to them, inventory investment just has to go down.
Aggressively down. Their theory is that by squeezing the inventory levels, it will somehow force operations to become leaner and more efficient. And, hopefully maintain customer service as a sort of byproduct.
Right, hopefully. And then finally, we have to factor in the ESG perspective, environmental, social, and governance. They are looking at this entire tug of war and just focusing on compliance and sustainability.
Right, making sure everything's above board.
Yeah, they want to ensure that whatever inventory you do hold and however you manufacture it meets all the mandatory and voluntary environmental regulations.
It's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
It really is. Honestly, it sounds exactly like a family road trip from hell.
Oh, how so?
Well, finance is the dad who wants to buy the absolute cheapest gas and sleep in the car to save money.
Okay.
Operations is the mom driving who refuses to pull over for bathroom breaks because they just want to make good time. Marketing is the kid in the back seat who wants to stop at every single roadside attraction to buy souvenirs. And ESG is the other kid, making sure everyone is properly sorting their snack wrappers into the recycling.
That's brilliant. That is exactly what it's like.
Right. So how does a company ever get these people to agree?
Well, the only way to reconcile that family road trip is by zooming out and taking a holistic supply chain perspective. The internal departmental view is just too narrow.
It's too selfish almost.
Yeah, exactly. A true lean supply chain perspective dictates that you must minimize the total inventory anywhere in the entire chain, from the raw dirt being mined out of the earth all the way to the end consumer.
Because if you just bully your suppliers into holding the inventory for you so your own books look clean, you haven't actually solved anything.
Precisely. You're just hiding the problem. If you shift the burden to your suppliers, their carrying costs go up, which means they produce in smaller, less efficient lots, which drives their prices up.
So ultimately, you end up paying for that inefficiency anyway.
You do. By minimizing inventory across the whole chain, you lower the overall systemic costs. That allows you to lower the final price to the consumer, which increases market share. And then every department shares in the resulting profits.
But to achieve that holistic view, you really have to understand the physical reality of how goods flow and transform. Which leads us to inventory types and classifications. I mean, the material doesn't just instantly appear, right?
No, not at all.
It starts way upstream with Tier 2 suppliers, the companies harvesting the raw materials like rubber or iron ore.
Right. And from there, those raw materials flow to Tier 1 suppliers who do the initial processing. They hold raw materials, work in process, which is often abbreviated as WIP, and finished goods. But their finished good is just the starting raw material for the main manufacturer.
Actually, let's pause on WIP for a second because that's a crucial CPIM term. Work in process. It's the stuff that is no longer raw material, but it isn't a finished product yet either.
Yeah.
It's like a car frame on an assembly line that doesn't have doors or an engine yet.
Yes, exactly. And WIP is a massive trap for cash.
Oh, I bet.
Because once a manufacturer finishes processing that WIP, it becomes a finished or semi-finished good. From the factory, it flows downstream to distribution centers, then out to wholesalers, and finally to retailers who put it on a shelf for the customer.
But there is one specific classification of inventory that exists at every single stage of that massive chain, and that's MRO. Maintenance, repair, and operating supplies.
MRO is fascinating because it never actually becomes part of the final product, but the entire system collapses without it.
So it's like the industrial lubricant for the assembly line machines.
Yes, or the safety goggles for the welders, the drill bits, and, even the printer paper in the accounting office. Every node in the supply chain requires MRO to function.
Wow. But knowing what inventory you have, the raw materials, WIP, finished goods, MRO, that's really only half the battle. The real risk is deciding when to trigger the movement of those goods. Planners essentially have to choose between push and pull systems.
And that choice dictates the risk profile of the entire company.
Right.
So a push system relies on forecasting. You're predicting what customers will want months in advance, building it and pushing it down the chain.
So the advantage there is that the inventory is on hand, ready to go.
Yes, exactly. But the massive vulnerability is that if your forecast is wrong, you are stuck with millions of dollars of dead stock.
Not to mention the bullwhip effect. I mean, we all saw this during the pandemic with things like paper towels and toilet paper.
Oh yeah, a perfect example.
A slight bump in consumer demand causes the retailer to panic and order 10% more. Then the wholesaler sees that and orders 20% more from the distributor just to be safe. By the time that signal hits the paper mill, they are ramping up production by 50% for a demand spike that never actually existed.
The bullwhip effect is just the ultimate nightmare of a push system. Now, the alternative is a pull system, which is the foundation of just-in-time manufacturing.
Okay, how does that work?
You don't make anything until a specific customer order pulls the demand through the system. You carry extremely low, or even zero, finished goods inventory.
Which sounds like finance's dream come true.
Oh, it is, until a disruption hits.
Ah.
Pull systems trade the risk of dead stock for the risk of catastrophic supply chain failure. If a cargo ship gets stuck in a canal or a supplier has a fire, a pull system has no buffer. Production stops immediately, lead times skyrocket, and customer service plummets.
That is terrifying. Now, we keep talking about factories, pallets, and paper mills, but one of the most vital concepts for someone studying inventory planning is the service industry twist. We tend to think inventory only applies to physical products.
Right, like boxes in a warehouse.
Yeah, but service industries have what are known as facilitating goods.
And facilitating goods are physical items that are absolutely essential to delivering a non-physical service. And they are subject to the exact same brutal forces of excess, shortage, and perishability as any manufacturing component.
Going back to the hook we started with surgery, the actual product being purchased is the operation itself. It's a service. But the scalpels, the anesthesia, the specialized cardiac stents, the bandages, those are all facilitating goods.
Think about the constraints those goods place on the service itself. A surgeon's inventory includes sterilized tools that have literal expiration dates on their sterility.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah. It includes highly specialized, expensive implants. And crucially, it includes the perishable time of the operating room itself. If an hour goes by unused, you can never get that inventory of time back.
And you can't exactly tell a patient who is open on the table, sorry, we're going to back order this valve, come back in 3 weeks.
Exactly why the management of those facilitating goods dictates how a service business schedules, prices, and designs its offerings. You see the same thing in restaurants with highly perishable food ingredients, or even a painting contractor who has to manage the shelf life of custom mixed chemicals. The inventory drives the service capability.
So whether you are building pickup trucks or performing open heart surgery, you have inventory. But we can't just point to a shelf and call it all stuff, right?
No, definitely not.
Every piece of inventory needs a specific job description. It needs a functional role.
And classifying inventory by its function is how a planner actually gains control. So the most recognizable function is safety stock. Its dedicated job is to act as an emergency buffer.
Gotcha.
It protects the company against uncertainty, whether that's an unpredictable spike in customer demand or sudden delay from a supplier.
Then there is decoupling inventory, which is slightly different. Decoupling acts like a shock absorber between two independent operations. So if you have machine A that produces 100 parts an hour, and it feeds into machine B, which can only process 50 parts an hour, you have a bottleneck.
A huge bottleneck.
Right. And if you don't put decoupling inventory between them, machine A has to constantly shut down and wait.
But by decoupling them, you allow each work center to operate at its own maximum efficiency without being handcuffed to the speed of the other.
That makes total sense.
Another functional role is anticipation inventory. This is stock you build up intentionally ahead of a known, predictable event. If you sell toys, you build anticipation inventory in October ahead of the holiday rush.
Right.
Or if you know your factory requires a 2-week maintenance shutdown in July, you build anticipation stock in June so you can keep selling while the machines are offline.
And then you have lot size inventory, sometimes called cycle stock. This exists purely because of the realities of purchasing and production. Like, if I'm fixing a cabinet and I only need one specialized hinge, but the supplier only sells them in boxes of 50.
Right, you're stuck with 49 extras.
Exactly. Those other 49 hinges sitting in my garage are lot size inventory. It's just cheaper and more practical to buy in bulk.
You also have transportation inventory, which is simply the material currently in transit on a truck, train, or cargo ship. It is inventory you own, but cannot physically use or sell yet.
Okay, here is one function that always trips me up. Hedge inventory. Isn't hedge inventory just a fancy corporate euphemism for gambling?
Gambling? How do you mean?
Like if I read an article that copper prices might jump next year, so I decide to buy 10 tons of copper right now and hoard it, that sounds like a casino bet.
I mean, it can definitely look like speculation to an outsider. But through the lens of professional inventory planning, it is a calculated mechanism for risk management. Companies utilize hedge inventory to protect their profit margins against known systemic market volatilities.
So instead of betting on a hunch, it's more like buying insurance.
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, if you know a major labor union contract at a critical shipping port is expiring in 3 months and there's a 70% historical probability of a strike, buying extra materials now isn't gambling.
Okay. Yeah.
It is an intentional defensive hedge to ensure your factory doesn't shut down when the port freezes.
Okay, that makes total sense. Another defensive strategy is risk pooling. The idea here is that instead of holding inventory in 10 separate small regional warehouses,
Right.
you aggregate the demand and centralize everything into one massive facility.
Right.
Statistically, it smooths out the peaks and valleys of demand variability, which lets you hold less total safety stock and lowers your overall carrying costs.
Risk pooling is mathematically brilliant, but it only works under strict conditions.
Oh. Like what?
Well, you can only successfully pool risk if the demand patterns across your various markets are somewhat similar. Furthermore, because you are now shipping from one central location, the customer has to be willing to accept slightly longer lead times.
Right.
And finally, the net savings of holding less inventory has to actually outweigh the increased outbound transportation costs of shipping goods further distances.
So you can't just pool everything everywhere and expect it to magically save money.
No, absolutely not.
Especially because inventory is a ticking clock. There's a concept known as the inventory life cycle. And if you chart it on a graph, the value just plummets over time.
It is a harsh reality. Inventory begins its life as operating inventory. It is active, valuable, and ready to fulfill its functional role. But if it sits on the shelf for too long without being used, it degrades into excess inventory.
And then?
Give it a few more months, it becomes inactive inventory. Eventually, it crosses the line into obsolete inventory.
At which point, you're basically paying rent to store garbage.
Literally. The final stage is scrap. The longer a physical good sits there failing to execute its job description, the closer it gets to becoming completely worthless, all while consuming your warehouse space and your capital.
Which brings us to the ultimate challenge for the inventory planner. We know inventory loses value over time. We know it ties up cash. And we know it is exposed to massive external risks. The CPI materials refer to these as steeple risks.
Right. STEEPLE is an acronym for the macro-level threats every supply chain faces. Sociocultural shifts, technological changes, economic downturns, environmental disasters, political instability, legal or regulatory changes, and ethical controversies.
Let's ground that with an example. So a political risk could be a sudden 30% tariff slapped on the microchips you import.
Yep.
A technological risk could be your competitor releasing a breakthrough product that instantly renders your current inventory obsolete.
And the fatal trap many inexperienced planners fall into is trying to offset those massive steeple risks simply by building huge buffers of inventory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they think, tariffs might go up, let's buy a 2-year supply of microchips. But they forget that inventory itself carries inherent risks.
Right. If you buy a 2-year supply of microchips, you risk theft, warehouse damage, and the massive technological risk that those chips become useless in 6 months anyway. You cannot solve a risk problem by just throwing more risky inventory at it.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I'm a planner, I'm looking at thousands of different items. Some are critical, some are cheap, some are prone to obsolescence, some last forever. I can't put an armed guard in front of every bolt, and I can't buffer everything. I assume I have to play favorites.
You do.
I need a mathematical way to triage the warehouse and figure out which boxes actually matter most to the bottom line.
You just perfectly described the solution, inventory segmentation, specifically ABC control. This is the cornerstone of inventory policy, and it's based on Pareto's law, the famous 80-20 rule.
Right.
The math behind this is essential for anyone taking the CPI exam. You classify every item in your inventory by calculating its annual dollar usage.
And the math is pretty straightforward. You take the annual unit usage, so how many you use in a year, and multiply it by the unit cost. So if I use 1,000 specialized brackets a year and they cost $10 each, my annual dollar usage for that bracket is $10,000.
Exactly. You calculate that annual dollar usage for every single SKU in your system, and then you rank them from highest to lowest. This automatically segments your inventory into A, B, and C items.
Let's break this down. A items are the critical few. They only make up about 10 to 20% of the actual physical items in your warehouse, but they account for a staggering 50 to 70% of your total annual dollar value. These are the VIPs.
And because they carry so much financial weight, A items dictate strict policies. They require high security storage, their safety stock levels are calculated meticulously,
Right.
and they are subject to rigorous, frequent physical cycle counting to ensure the system records actually match reality.
Then you have the B items. These are right in the middle. They make up about 20% of your physical items and represent roughly 20% of your value. They get standard ordering procedures and average management controls.
And finally, you have the C items, the trivial many. These often make up 50% of the total items in your entire system, but they only represent 10 to 30% of the total dollar value.
I always compare ABC classification to packing for an international vacation.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, your A items are your passport and your wallet. You put them into a secure pocket, and you pat that pocket every 5 minutes to make sure they're still there.
High value, high security, frequent counting.
Makes sense.
Your B items are your clothes. You pack them carefully, you generally know what you have, but you aren't obsessively verifying their location every 10 seconds.
And your C items are the Q-tips. You
Yep.
buy a box of 500 once a year, you throw a handful in your toiletry bag, and you completely forget about them until you eventually run out months later.
You certainly don't review your Q-tip forecast every morning.
No, you don't. Which highlights the ultimate practical application of this framework for a supply chain professional. ABC classification is fundamentally about the intelligent allocation of human attention.
Because time is finite.
Exactly. Human brain power and hours in the day are finite resources. A planner cannot review daily demand forecasts, negotiate supplier contracts, and perfectly optimize safety stock for every single Q-tip and hex nut in a 2 million square foot facility.
You let the annual dollar usage tell you exactly where to spend your brain power. You focus your human capital on the A items because that is where the true financial risk and reward live.
Perfectly said.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's trace the massive journey we've just taken through your CPM materials. We started by uncovering the internal tug-of-war marketing wanting more inventory to please customers, finance wanting less to save cash, operations just wanting long, uninterrupted production runs.
Right.
And we explored how lean strategy resolves this by minimizing inventory across the entire chain.
We followed the physical flow of material from raw dirt to finished goods and saw how even service industries, like surgery, are entirely dependent on managing facilitating goods.
We gave inventory-specific job descriptions, whether it's decoupling a bottleneck, providing safety stock, or hedging against a port strike. And finally, we learned how to tame the sheer chaos of a warehouse using the ABC dollar usage method, ensuring we focus our limited human attention on the items that actually drive the business.
The biggest takeaway is that inventory is never just static stuff on a shelf. It is a highly volatile, rapidly depreciating financial asset that requires constant strategic maneuvering.
So as you head into your exam or walk into your next supply chain strategy meeting, keep that dynamic balancing act front and center.
And I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent some time discussing steeple risks, the political disruptions, the technological shifts, the environmental disasters. For decades, the ultimate holy grail of supply chain management has been to go lean, to operate with just-in-time delivery and minimize inventory to the absolute bone.
Lean has been the undisputed king of efficiency.
It has. But as global political instability increases, as extreme weather events shut down vital shipping lanes, and as massive port strikes become a regular reality, will the supply chains of the near future be forced to abandon lean?
Oh, wow.
Will the smartest companies survive, not by being lean, but by intentionally going back to carrying massive, expensive fat in the form of huge anticipation and hedge inventories just to weather the coming storms?
The return of the corporate cholesterol is a survival tactic. That is a heavy question to consider. But that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Keep digging into your materials, keep asking the hard questions about how these systems actually work, and we will catch you next time.